Hey everyone, I'm Carlos and welcome to a new book discussion of productbookclub.com. Every month we discuss online a book about product management together with the author and other product colleagues. If you want to find the recordings from our previous discussions and also join us and participate on the upcoming ones, go to productbookclub.com. To find out how to support the book club and help us keep it running without any ads, check the links in the description.
Yeah, so welcome everyone to the Product Book Club. Today we're gonna discuss about Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. Steve, he's gonna join us or be there for the Q&A or discussion if you have for him from 6:30 or like the second half. So maybe we can start with a discussion between ourselves. And yeah, for the ones that haven't joined before, it's quite like a free or open format. So, everyone can make questions or discuss, or also just share like main takeaways or, I don't know, things that you want to discuss with the others. For the ones that maybe haven't read the book or are still reading it, I made like a very quick summary, and then I think Steve can also say more. But yeah, it's a book about usability, right? It was first, I think the first edition was written on 2000s, but then now the current one is if I'm not mistaken, I think the third edition. And I think what I liked the most was, well, there are like three main laws that Steve talks about, right? The first one, don't make me think, which is sort of like the overarching rule, and just always thinking, how not to make the user think, right? Even if it's for a split second. The goal is always to make the website effortless to use, self-explanatory, self-evident, so then you don't need to spend any brain juice in understanding where you are. The second law is make every click an obvious choice with no need to think, right? I think at some point he mentions that it doesn't matter really how many clicks the user needs to do, as long as they are like obvious and again, you're not thinking if I'm on the right path or not. Law number 3, that the one that I like the most and I have applied also the most is, have the words on each page, and then when you have left, then you have again. And has helped me a lot, not only on like the websites, but even on like emails. First I like write down what I want to say, and then I look and see what words I can get rid of. So yeah, just it's basically trying to remove all unnecessary words, of course, to reduce the distractions and to make sure that what you think is important stands out, right? Then the book also discusses about how to design the website to make it easy for easy scanning, about web navigation, about the homepage, how to do some usability testing as well, where he talks and also talks about his other book. And then on the revisited edition, there is also a section about mobile, which I think is quite interesting, where he talks about, what is to make something delightful, and then also about apps that you need to make them to be learnable and also memorable. So as I said, for me, like main takeaways of the book, I think are that we as users, when we are checking our website, we are not really making optimal choices, right? We're not going to be like checking at all the options and then see and evaluate to see which one we click, but rather we just satisfy. That I think you might always be thinking there is something different when you are designing and investing all the time on working on the website, right? The other one, as I said, getting rid of well, more than half of all the words on each page. And the other one, I think as well, about clicks, right? In the way that I think I've discussed often sometimes with designers, that maybe it's okay to not have everything presented at once, but maybe after a second screen or a second click, just to make sure that, again, we don't overload the user, for example, with everything, or just making sure that we present only the necessary things at that certain step. So that's me, sort of like an intro. I don't know if someone else has also like main takeaways they would like to share with the audience.
Yeah, maybe I can go. yeah, for me, this book was one of the first ones that I read as a software engineer, and it actually made me think a lot about my career opportunities, because back in the days, software design was not a so explored area, and software engineers made a lot of false assumptions, and I had a feeling that it needs to be changed. It has to be different, and yeah, one of the book takeaways that I try to keep through my career for now is to always try to do usability testing, even things that you might think look obvious and simple and should not bring any questions. Is very easy to validate with a simple user test when you invite users, when you actually put them in front of a tablet, computer, whatever. It might be anything. It might be even like a package of the real physical product, and ask them to do like certain steps, right? Or ask just to do and then goal. And I'm surprised, because I'm working big company at the moment, and I'm surprised how how big companies still don't follow these simple rules, and they focus a lot on business, and I think that's why this book is still so popular through decades already, that it's still valid, and all these basics are still needed, and should be I think should be an essential part of existing software development, let's say. Yeah, that's my main takeaway.
At first, I thought you were going to say that you started writing code that was more self-evident. Yeah, I think for me, one of the interesting metaphors was about having a website that's as easy to navigate as a physical store. And also, I think as I was reading the book and then in the job during the day, I found myself a lot of times unknowingly or previously unconsciously giving too much credit to the navigation plan that we were kind of crafting out in our stories versus what is really, what would people do when they're not thinking? Like what do you do when you just look at the page with your job to be done or action in mind? Yeah, that was pretty interesting, because you start noticing it more in conversations, and it changes the way I was analyzing and thinking about my experiments.
I'd completely agree with Brennan on that one. So that metaphor of likening it to shopping in a store, that helped me explain what my job was to like my parents, for example. So it was only after reading this book that I was like, you know how like when you go in a shop and everything's laid out in the right place? That's kind of what I do, but on websites or on your mobile, making sure things are close to your thumb. My mum's like, having never understood what I do.
Nice.
For me, was the whole realization of, and there is this analogy of the billboard, right? Where we sometimes think that it's like we are designing a brochure for a product, but in fact it's like we are trying to create an attention-grabbing and maybe informative, hopefully informative billboard for the car passing by. And it's kind of a realization of how easy it is to miss that pair of eyes as the driver of that car continues to drive away. So it's something to keep in mind. It is something to always keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Nice. So, someone else wants to share?
I think I read the book like a really long time ago for the first time, so maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I think I still have the same copy, so there's no mobile in here. And there's and I responded because there's an example where in the navigational part where it says can you find a forehead VCR? Like, I was like, forehead VCR. What the hell is a forehead? Oh, it's a video cassette recorder with 4 heads. So I'm like, wow, this is a really old book. And then surprisingly, like most of the stuff that's in here, and it's pretty sad to see, is actually still relevant for most websites I use today, right? So a lot of these things are still necessary. So I think it's really cool that we're reading this, because there's all these things are still relevant. I think the whole discussion also about conventions, right? So how many clicks? I think there's a lot of people still think that everything needs to be reachable within 3 clicks, which is like a convention, but it's not. Well, I don't agree with it. I haven't actually run experiments to validate it, but the same thing is for more steps increases friction, more steps in a form, which is actually not true, because that's actually something I experimented on. So these whole conventions, how they grow, and same with Hamburger Menus, and these are not really nice experiences we give to customers. So I think I really like the whole breaking down. It's good to use conventions if if they're the right ones, because then it makes stuff easier. But be wary of conventions, because it can also be the wrong ones, right? Who's actually creating or testing these conventions? Yeah. What else? I think also with the navigational part, I actually didn't know it the first time, but I read the part where we're saying that when you redesign a website, then the designers or the ones who write the information architecture, they only look at the two first levels. And I was thinking, shit, that's like a while ago that happened to me. That's exactly the same thing. You're looking at the high level mapping of the asset, and then they only designed the first 2 levels. And then when we were building it, we found out that the lower levels, they didn't actually really match. So we need to, we needed to fix it in the end. So yeah, that was really really surprising that it's in there. So I actually read it. I should have known it, but I didn't. So yeah.
Nice.
While I was reading the book, I was thinking about that a lot of websites or a lot of applications nowadays are really look very, very similar to each other. And so I'm a front-end developer. As a front-end developer, I was thinking sometimes we can either build it in a kind of standard, boring way, or we can build it in something like at least thinking more about it or making it a bit better. But after reading a book, I got this understanding that it's very good to have a website consistent, so users don't think a lot about where is menu, where is navigation, how to use it. But actually, it would be good to ask Steve about when is actually a good time to, time to iterate or invent something new. Because, for example, somebody has created this Hamburger menu on mobile websites, or somebody created Tinder with a swipe right, and we all know about it. But they made something it wasn't so popular at the time, but they just decided to break the, standard approach and use new one. So it's interesting to discuss about it.
Yeah. I always think these difficult things are sort of on purpose, man. When I downloaded TikTok to try it out, I couldn't understand it, and then I just deleted it, and I was like, okay, maybe it's not for me. I'm not young enough anymore for this thing, man. Nice. Someone else? Any takeaways, or maybe we can, Alejandro?
I think you are muted, or at least we cannot hear you. Yeah, you are muted now, definitely. Okay, maybe something wrong with settings.
It may not be so self-evident, but you have to sometimes click the join with computer audio on Zoom.
Yes, there's
automatically. It doesn't automatically enable your microphone, I think.
Are we talking about the usability of Zoom? I think that's a whole, we can speak a lot about that.
Yeah.
I think that getting back to the hamburger menu, I think it was actually invented in 1995 by Xerox. So it was used in one of their. But Xerox invented a lot of cool stuff, and a lot of the stuff was stolen by Apple. And one of the hamburger menus, unfortunately, one of the things that they also designed. And yeah.
Do you think they'll need to modernize some of the patterns? So we've still got the save icon as the floppy disk, and obviously kids nowadays don't know what a floppy disk is.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that or I think the one from Tinder is indeed like now I see Tinder for shoes, man, or Tinder for I don't know whatever, right? And I think or it's also like sometimes I also find myself is one of the like double tapping or like pinching, like swiping is already to me also like one of the first things I would try if something is sort of like not working, right? Alejandro, I think we can still cannot hear you.
You can also write your takeaway in the chat, right?
Maybe you can connect through the mobile phone.
Yeah, but there is also, indeed, like a pop-up appears somewhere, I think, where you have to select join with audio or something.
Maybe it's me, Steve. Maybe we can try and all talk. Maybe we can all talk Alejandro through it. If you're in the web, this always happens when you got usability people trying to use software. Do you have a mute button at the bottom left? Are you in a browser? You have a mute button? Nod yes or no. There's a pop-up arrow next to the mute button, and if you click on that, it should give you your options for you can select a microphone. You might have the wrong microphone turned on. I do that a lot. No.
No, because Timur, you're as a host. Can you not unmute her?
Yeah, she unmuted herself. It's just still not. She's still not.
Okay. I asked her to unmute. She's unmuted now. There's probably something wrong with the mic.
Yeah.
If you, sometimes I know, like if you have another video software open, like BlueJeans or something, you have to quit the previous software to let Zoom take over the microphone. Or Slack calls, for example. That happens with me.
I'm sorry, I muted myself. I shouldn't have because I'm giggling because I always find this so funny. And it's usually me that's having the problem.
But it's good. I mean, we can start now with that. Maybe not like pure Q&A, but also more like discussion. Maybe Steve, you have to say on these new patterns or when to like give it a try to the new ones.
Oh yeah, no, I've been taking a whole bunch of notes. Even with your summary, Carlos, at the beginning, I took like 3 notes about things that I should mention if I ever get around to doing another version of the book. And I have been giggling at a lot of things that people have said because it's very interesting. Giggling is always a good sign, I think. So Timur asked about when I sort of say don't reinvent the wheel, unnecessarily, and you were asking when should you, when obviously you got new stuff coming out, and so somebody did it.
Steve, you have your video also
off,
unless it's on purpose, then it's okay.
No, I just didn't think of it. There I am. There's my office. Hi. So when should you? It's a good question. I mean, yeah, you're right. If everybody, didn't try out new stuff, then we wouldn't have any new stuff. So it's obviously important. I guess what I was reacting to was that very often people feel like their job is to create new stuff rather than their job to create something that works, you know. And obviously you don't get like design awards for using the same old you know, design elements, you know, as often. So I was trying to like tell people, you don't really have to do that, you know. It's like not always a good idea to do that, because if you, I mean, I dated back to, I've been around for a long time, so I sort of dated back in the late 90s, people would often create their own scroll bars, you know, and the fact is, scroll bars work well because they've been tinkered with. At that point, they had been tinkered with, you know, for like 10 or 15 years, and they had made them work really, really well. And if you just came in and threw together your own scroll bars from some widgets that were in Flash or whatever, they weren't going to work as well. You know, so I was trying to get people to avoid that. But I think you should always be willing to, you know, try and come up with really great ideas for some different way to do something. But what you should be really careful about is not just going ahead and implementing them because you think it's a great idea. That I think I had a standard for it eventually in the book, which was, you know, it's a great, you know, often if you say something, you show people something that you can't, an idea that you can have with, a lot of them will say, yeah, that's really cool. And you'll think that that's validation. Whereas what you really need is, the standard should be, yeah, when can I start using that? You know, because there's a big difference between that's really cool. A lot of stuff is really cool, but it's not necessarily something that's actually going to be something you'd want to use. That happens a lot it's true in usability tests. People will often come up with suggestions, like, I think this interface would be so much better as a map, choosing from a map than choosing from a list of places. And you can hear people sometimes back in the observation room going, oh yeah, that's a great idea. It's a great idea. But what I found, and most people I know who do usability tests find, is that if you actually, at the end of the session, you know, when you've gotten what you need, you come back to that and say, okay, so you suggested maybe doing a map instead of a list. How do you picture that working? How would that work? And by the time a person has finished explaining how it would work, 99 times out of 100, they'll end up saying, yeah, but actually it's probably better off with the list. You know? So you should always be willing to explore new options. And if you have a great idea, basically everybody will think that it's like such a great idea that, you know, it'll be obvious that it's worth at least prototyping and then seeing if, when you actually give it to some people to try out, that it's still a great idea. But yeah, that's the long answer for that.
Okay, thanks.
And you mentioned, like, you had some tips on what things to add if you were to make the new edition, which was one of my questions. You know, like, I think that the latest one, if I'm not mistaken, is 2014.
It's 2014. My son does that really well. I can't do that well. Basically, yeah, it's old. It's old at this point, and I really should do another one. It's just it's a ton of work.
But yeah, if you were to be convinced to make a new one, what were, like, you know, like the things that you were like, okay, I really need to change or update these or add this thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the tricky part. I guess I've been keeping notes. I always keep notes about what I would do if I did do another edition. And so I have tons of emails to myself, because that's how I keep my notes, is I send myself an email. And so I have tons of notes about what I think would be worth updating. I was glad that people had some nice things to say about the mobile chapter from the last edition, because it really wasn't very good. I knew I had to write about mobile because that was what everybody was doing by that point. But from my perspective, it wasn't like mature enough what people were doing to actually say really useful things about it. So I kind of point people to Luke W. You all know Luke W.
Yeah.
So if you want to know about mobile, follow Luke W. And his last name is like Robliuski.
The guy from Google, I think, no?
I call him Luke Unpronounceable.
Luke.
But he's Luke W. almost most places, and certainly on Twitter. And he, you know, if you want to keep up with what the right way to think about mobile, he's always the person to follow. But I would do another chapter. I mean, at this point I could do a decent chapter on mobile, and you know, I'd have to write a bunch about basically how usability fits into the whole world of UX, because UX wasn't really a thing, you know, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
UX had started to come into its own, but you know, now people really refer to usability as you know, it's like a subspecialty of UX. So I have to talk a little bit about the broader world of UX, and there's a whole bunch of stuff I do. That's why it's such a lot of work. Plus even I mean, part of what I had to do last time was go in and replace a lot of the examples that were, you know, made it look really, really old. And finding new examples is very hard work. It's really, really hard work.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, quite honestly, it was written about websites, because websites were what people were doing back when I first wrote in 2000. And mostly informational websites, not even that transactional. Most web apps were very clunky still at that point, for the most part. So a lot of the stuff, like about navigation and whatever, is very desktop oriented, and it's very informational sites oriented. And I'd really have to go in and rework a whole bunch of that, but still keep it short.
Yeah.
You know? So.
Yeah, because indeed, I think when I was reading every chapter, you know, I was sort of like thinking of some, I don't know, what apps or websites that I use, and I was like, yeah, still there, right, or still valid. And I think the only one that I thought like, wait, this one I think I don't see that much often is, I think one of the rules or like things that you say, like, you know, this one should be there always, is about page titles, right? That it should always be there.
Oh yeah, right.
But then I thought like, wait, a lot of apps that I use, I at least I didn't remember that all of them have that space of the page title. So I was like, okay, is this really still like valid, right? Or what would you think of it now?
Right. Well, so I mean, it gets complicated, which is why it would be hard to keep it short, because so many mobile sites, which is probably, you know, kind of what you're talking about, like apps, are so many mobile apps, so many mobile sites, which is kind of what the page titles were for. It's like you're going to click on something, it's going to take you to another page, and you need the page title at the top so that you know, however you got there, whether you got there by search or whatever, what basically the domain of this page is, what the topic of this page is. But so much of the stuff now, because it's done responsively, is a single page. You know, how much stuff that you look at are single page websites that you just scroll forever. So you're not using that kind of navigation at all, and you're not ending up on something that, you know, it may have a heading, it may have a subheading, but it's not like it's a separate page for the most part. So that kind of complicates it. I just redid my website. I haven't launched it yet, but I sort of managed to keep it in separate pages and with page titles, and still hopefully made it look like not as old-fashioned as it always looked. So, but yeah, no, there's a lot of that stuff about the navigation that's, you know, you just don't do anymore, and you certainly don't do on a mobile screen because you haven't got room for it. You know? Yeah. So I'd have to rework the navigation chapter, but I was very pleased. A lot of stuff that you guys said, it was really great summary, Carlos, I thought, and like I said, it gave me a lot to write down. But I was also kind of pleased, tickled at that some of you said, yeah, but it's still relevant. You know, it's like this stuff hasn't been fixed. Yeah. And it hasn't, you know, I mean, that's not true. It's a lot better than, believe me, I'm really old. It's a lot better than it was. I was working on this stuff when they first started doing the internet, and it was not a happy place to be. I mean, it was exciting. There's been nothing like it, but it didn't work very well. And then by around 2000, by the time I wrote the book, people had kind of figured out basically how to do a lot of this stuff. So stuff was pretty clean. From my perspective, which I try not to talk about too much because it makes me sound like an old guy sitting on the porch telling the kids to get off the lawn. A lot of it's gone downhill since then. I feel like the stuff where, you know, sites are designed with responsive design so that they work on mobile devices, but if you look at them on a desktop, it's like, whoa, 200-point headlines, you know, and a tiny little block of text and whatever. So some of it's kind of gone downhill, but people are doing a lot more. The other thing is people are doing stuff that's a lot more ambitious because you can do transactional stuff so easily now. So most of it's transactional rather than informational.
Yeah.
So anyway, questions?
Yeah, someone else has any questions for Steve?
Yeah, I'd like to pose a question.
Yeah.
I'm curious what your take is on natural interfaces, as I feel like a lot of, well, personally, I work in conversational interfaces, which is supposed to obviously work towards this promise of a 100% self-evident interface where you just say exactly what you want to say and get whatever you want in return. But it's not always the case. And in the real world, a lot of people, when they actually come face to face with a conversational interface, they don't even know what to say or trust that what they say is going to be understood or fully work. And yeah, I'm just curious what your take is.
Yeah. What kind of conversational interface are you working on? Are you in speech or?
Yeah, so it's speech
chatbots
and chatbots and text.
Chatbots, yeah. I don't, you know, I've been like, one of the things I've always been very interested in, there aren't that many things I'm really interested in. One of them for a long time has been AI. So I was reading about AI, you know, avidly way back when. And at that point, AI always seemed like speech recognition. It was one of those things that was always going to be 10 years off, you know. And for a long time, speech recognition was 10 years off. And then like in the late 90s, all of a sudden it worked, you know. And AI for me is sort of the same. It's like, if you're working in a certain limited range of things, then it's possible to do AI now that is really impressive and seems like it works really well. But on the other hand, it's really fragile. You know, you better not step outside of that limited domain because it's going to break and it's going to frustrate the heck out of you. You know, I mean, I have an Alexa. We have an Alexa in our kitchen. My wife spends most of the time just, I like it more because I'm more, you know, gadgety. My wife like just curses at Alexa all the time. It's like we have different varieties of ways of cursing at Alexa. When you ask her to play a particular song and she comes back with some like ridiculous interpretation of what you said. Yeah. And so when it works, it's fabulous. I think it's going to take a while for it to get to be, you know, robust enough that it's really easy. You know, in a way, the more robust the technology is, the easier your job is, the easier it is to design for it. You know, if it's more robust, because you just figure out what people would naturally try and do, and then your job becomes kind of figuring out what the range of ways that people would phrase a question, you know, is I think it'll improve dramatically, but it's a tough thing right now. I think I find it's always frustrating. I find using it's always frustrating. I would never, you know, I'll like spend 20 minutes on hold listening to the same jingle rather than work with a chatbot most of the time. Yeah, I can get to a human being, you know. So, but yeah, more about that. I mean, what?
No, I was just curious. I mean, it's not a unique position that you said about rather wanting to like wait on hold, because this is one of the challenges that even when we do solve problems really well or specific scopes really well, that when people perceive having to speak or that it's going to be a machine trying to understand, there's not really much will from people to actually try what is self-evident.
Yeah. No, I think if the stuff gets more robust, then people will have more good experiences with it, and generally speaking, they'll be more willing to try, you know, to put some effort into it. But yeah, it'll take a while. Just so they don't get a hold of the nuclear codes.
Good.
Oh dear. Yeah. So basically, I'm also interested in your opinion about personalization topic, because when we designed the websites 20 years ago, all we knew about the user is probably window size, maybe IP address, so we could guess maybe country. But for now, when you enter website, a lot of things, I think if you use Google Chrome or whatever, might be already known. And I think in the future, all this personalization might be possible. So when you would enter like certain website, company would know who you are, what are your interests, what are you looking probably for, and the interface might actually adjust to your needs, you know, and that would actually make a unique experience for you. So rather than designing universal menu for thousands of people, it will be one menu for you that would adjust based on information that we know already, you know. And I don't know how far we are in this area, and if it's actually something that would happen in the near future, you know.
I'm not sure that I can picture. My problem is that I'm not sure that I can picture what I would want it to do. You know, how I want it to personalize for me. I mean, there's obviously a lot of us react badly to inept personalization where they reveal that they know something about me that I didn't really expect they would. I have a hard time picturing how you're going to do something with that that's really that beneficial to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's something like retaining my settings across sessions, or allowing me to retain, you know, like my bookmarks across the same browser on all my devices, and that kind of thing is useful to me. But I don't know if I have that many, can imagine that many things that they could do that wouldn't either freak me out or not help me that much. Plus, they have to work really well. I mean, they have to work all the time. You know, they have to not be buggy, and they have to not produce oddball results and whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm always open. I mean, I try all this stuff all the time, and I'm always happy when I come across something that does a good job or something like that. But I think it's pretty tough.
Someone else, another question?
Alejandro, do you want to type a question into the chat?
It's interesting that what Brennan and what Ruslan said with the chatbots and with the personalization. You, Steve, mentioned that it might be that people don't use it because they don't trust it, or they're a bit afraid of it. As you just mentioned about, if it's too super personal and you like didn't expect it, or you don't want to share so much personal information, it's not going to help you. It's actually going to make you feel like not to use this website because they know too much. And what do you think might help to actually get through it? Is it just we just need to wait for another generation, or we just need to build a trust piece by piece, or we need to, I don't know, control it by government as it's happening now in different countries? So what's your thought about it?
I think it's got to be. I think it's got to be built piece by piece. I don't think it's you know. I mean, people. I think older people, apart from really old people, are willing to try the stuff and happy when it works well for them. You know, I mean, my wife and I love being able to ask Alexa to play a song for us while we're doing the dishes. You know, and we have no particular reason to feel wary about Alexa finding out what our taste in music is. You know, so that's fine. It does something we want, and it's not. There's no particular reason to be afraid of it. So, you know, I really like that. We use it all the time. I guess I feel like you kind of need, I don't think you need to wait for another generation. I think as the stuff improves, you know, even the people who are reluctant to use it will use it. You just have to have a good experience where it does something that you go like, oh, wow, that's really convenient for me. Yeah, that's great. I'm glad it does that. But I think that the vendors have to be really cautious about anything that makes people paranoid, you know. And I think they're aware of that. You know, it's not like they don't know. I mean, how many people actually think that Alexa is recording them all the time. I think it's a really big number.
Yeah, it is.
You know? and the answer is complicated. You know, I mean, it's not even that complicated. The answer is kind of no, and it's not that complicated. It's
yeah.
You know, but I think that perception is there, and that's the kind of thing that's hard to beat back and takes some time to beat back. So you gotta build the trust. But
yeah.
Maybe you have to have commercials about the fact that Alexa isn't really listening to you all the time.
There is a question from Alejandra. In terms of usability, what's your favorite website?
Good question. My favorite website is no more. My favorite website was something called Hipmunk, Hipmunk, like chipmunk, only without the C.
Yeah. For hotels, I think.
And for travel, yeah, for booking. Mostly it started off with air travel, and that's what it was great at. And it was you know, it was an ingenious idea. I mean, it was a really bright, innovative idea that actually was a really great idea. That it had a couple of things going for it. It's kind of hard to explain in a hurry, but I would highly recommend look it up, because there'll be articles about it that have screenshots of it. But the basic thing was, and they killed it off like about 6 months ago. They killed it off because their business model wasn't working well enough for them. Basically, it was, you know, one of these sites where you go and you find your book, you plan your air travel. But the problem was their business model relied on you then booking it through them, and it's often better to book it directly through the airline or, you know, whatever. So even though I loved it, I don't know if I ever actually booked it through them. And what it did was you would put in, you know, same as usual, you put in where you were going and when, and when you were coming back. And you could filter it. You could choose a specific airline or a set of airlines if you wanted it to filter it. But it would produce a screen that had like timelines. So it would be like from, you know, midnight to midnight or whatever. And then there'd be a timeline for each flight. And underneath the timeline, it would say what the departure time was, but it would also show you, if it was a connecting flight, it would show you how long the connection was. So you could just at a glance, you could see how long the flight was and what time of day it was, and whether it had a long connection or too short a connection. And you could, their default filter, their default sort order for these timelines was something they called agony, which was, it started at the top with the flights that had the shortest, had the least, without being too short, the least layover time, and that were cheapest and had most reliable on-time, you know, behavior. And so all the good qualities, it sorted it by a combination of all the good qualities. And it was just instead of having to go into most of the sites where you go in and you got a table of, you know, of flight numbers and times, and you have to figure out whether that's local time or your time, or whether the, you know, it's like those were always really just hard to read. And this gave you exactly the information that you wanted, and exactly in a very usable format. So that was often my favorite. And as much as I don't like the company, I like the Uber, you know, app, because it works really well and it gives you the information you want and solves some problems for you, whatever. Yeah. So, yeah. Alejandro, do you have a favorite? You could type in the chat. I don't have the chat open, actually.
And Phil, I think you want to make a question?
Yeah, I'll let, we'll see Alejandro's answer as well. But my question to Steve. So Steve, I previously was working in fintech, and I suppose staying on the theme of like dystopian futures and where can technology take us. We had a principles in Don't Make Me Think. We were going too close towards that, where for example, where a customer was applying for a credit card, we had to try and bring some friction in. or some cooling off time, aka filling out an application form in order to make sure they weren't making poor decisions. So in a world, for example, where we get to biometric identities and you could scan your retina to make a credit application, there's actually a view that says maybe you don't want to be that much towards don't make me think, because actually you want a bit of friction in there to ensure the customer's making the right decision, ensure they're thinking about it. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Like, is there too far of a frictionless world?
Yeah, no, I want to hear you describe it more, because there have been like half a dozen, Medium articles about that, about, sort of saying, well, he wrote this book called Don't Make Me Think, but there are times when we want people to think, when we want them to be more considerate about their choices. And I'm always like, yeah, sure. It's like, one of the things I was always pleased about, the title worked really well. One of the things I was always pleased about was almost everybody seemed to understand that the title actually meant, don't make me think about things I don't need to think about. I kind of was braced for a bunch of, like articles, reviews by people saying, yeah, well, this is like anti-intellectual and whatever, and kind of nobody did it. So, but these are, they're making that point. They're making it kind of thoughtfully. What in your case? So where do you feel the need to slow them down? I mean, apart from the stuff, is there's got to be stuff that you're doing now that you think you want to make them slow down?
So it was in a previous role, but it was to get store credit, and essentially the UK lawmakers say it needs to be a considered purchase. So we had the technology through the personalization that was previously mentioned.
Yeah,
we could pre-screen people and knew they were good for credit, but it didn't sit well with the regulator being able to say, click this button and we'll give you credit. They wanted to put a person through an application process,
okay,
purely to make them have time to think about it and digest it. Whereas the technology and the data was there for us to do it instantaneously.
Okay. Well, but you had no choice in that. I mean, you were under statutory,
We were under statutory. But I suppose you could argue the same for Amazon today, where on Amazon, I've got a Prime account. I can pay with one swipe of my phone.
Right.
And I do it often. But you could argue the counter that may be causing people to overextend themselves financially.
Right.
With Amazon, you can send it back, right? So with Amazon, you can send it back, so the impact is maybe less than if you buy a house when you.
Yeah, you can usually send it back, but no, I mean, so what's the ethical responsibility for shopping while drunk? It's like it's a good question, and I don't know. I don't really know what the answers are for that. I think it's kind of. I certainly think it's a good thing for the organizations to consider. I mean, whether they're going to do the right thing or not, whether they're going to be inclined to, when it's not a statutory requirement, whether they're going to be inclined to do that. Who knows? But on the other hand, it would seem to be in their interest to not have people making bad, credit decisions unless they're making more money by having people default. There's this whole, all of that stuff is so sticky. There's a fabulous book called, is it Evil by Design? There's a book basically about, it's a wonderful book. I haven't read the whole thing, but boy, the parts I read are just about the whole process of designing slot machines. Modern day slot machines for Las Vegas. It has like a history of slot machines, but it also talks about all the psychological research that goes into the design of those things to make them addictive. And it's quite amazing. I mean, it's not amazing that they want to make them addictive, but it's quite amazing how good they are at it and how much research has gone into it. So, there it's like, well, it's kind of pretty easy to say this is not really a good thing, but on the other hand, that's their business model, and they're not going to stop unless it's a statutory requirement. So,
Did you know that?
Sorry.
There's there's a feature on Gmail which kind of prevents kind of the drunken part.
Yeah.
So you can set a time, and after this time, every time you send an email, you first need to do a mathematical calculation to make sure that you're not sending drunk messages to your ex-girlfriend late at night. So
Really?
yeah.
That's good. That's good. But you choose to set that limit, right? For yourself.
Yeah, when you're sober.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. Right.
It reminds me also when I read this news of that a kid spent like, I don't know, $10,000 on their parents because they had the credit card information in the app, and then they suddenly spent all that money. I wanted to. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say they're actually, it's in the last couple of years, there's been now that UX is actually a kind of legitimate, profession or field. There's been a lot more people doing talks and writing about the ethics of it. That seems to have happened all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So there's a lot out there.
Yeah. On that note, maybe I have a question regarding this cookies consent that appears on every website, and it seems that every website has a unique experience for the same action. Sometimes it appears on bottom, sometimes on top, sometimes it's overlay. And I'm curious why we still don't standardize this requirement, as a part of maybe browser functionality, or I'm surprised that companies have to deal with it still like for years already.
Yeah, that is surprising. It seems like it should happen. I still, honestly, I still don't. I kind of don't know what I kind of know what I'm agreeing to, but it's kind of, the question that's never quite answered is, well, do I have a choice? If I say cancel, what's going to happen? It seems like if I say cancel, I get to use the site anyway. For the most part. I remember some sites a couple of years ago where if you said cancel, they wouldn't let you use it. But so it's kind of unclear to me at this point how those are working. Because unless you want to go and read the end user agreement, you're not going to figure out what it is that they're doing. And even if you go and read it, I used to go and read them sometimes, and it was like, oh, really? This is like instructions for putting a computer together or something. It makes no sense whatsoever. So yeah, they should be standardized. What do you think? What do people do? What do most do? You just click yes? All the time?
I click all cookies, accept all cookies.
Yeah.
I stop carrying it.
I think most people perceive it as a barrier when they enter website, and they try to overcome it as soon as possible. And I think,
How do they try and overcome it? What do you do?
Click somewhere.
See what happens, right?
Yeah.
I've started like browsing in incognito by default, so I just can accept all the time.
Oh, there you go.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
In browsers,
except lately I've started to find having my history is useful more and more often. It's like I'll say, oh, wait, I saw that a couple of days ago, and I'll search my history.
Yeah.
Whereas I never used to do that, but now I find it's kind of useful.
That's true.
In browsers, there is already a flag, do not track me. Maybe there will be flags like, okay, track me, but only for needed purposes, or also track me for advertising. If in future it would be a standard, we don't need to have agreed all the time to these cookies. Because it's really, I really feel it like a barrier, and I'm just, I have to press something to actually read the website, for example.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Steve, because I think towards the end of the book there are some how to do usability testings by yourself, and also some like remote. But now that I think everything is happening remote,
right.
Do you have any like new tips or?
Yeah. Sadly, the main impact of this, since I don't really do client work anymore. So okay. I don't really have to do any of that. But the impact on me has been, I really feel like I should update the rocket surgery book. And well, I had like 4 pages on doing remote testing in the rocket surgery book, which basically said, yeah, it's a really great thing and it's a much better way to do it, and all the cool kids are doing it now and it works really well and it's easy. But I feel like I should do an updated version of that and have like a whole chapter on sort of best practices for doing it remotely. I mean, to do the testing itself is very little different remotely, very little different. But I think people could, you know, if I was going to do it, I would basically go out and talk to people who are doing it and find out what's working best. At this point, but it's the stuff's pretty good.
There is an answer from Alejandra about what's her favorite website, and it's Uber for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a very hard time with them as a company, because any company who has as their motto, who has as their intent disruption, I'm very suspicious of, because disruption usually means we're going to go in and we're going to do a lot of unethical things and break a lot of rules and make a lot of money and put the people who are doing it now out of business. And Uber seems to be the poster child for that. It's like, but on the other hand, I do take Uber sometimes because it works really well.
Jordan, I think you had a question?
I have 2 questions actually. So one is about what your thoughts are about hamburger menus, and the second thing is that so there's a trend, I think that Timur also kind of highlighted it, is that websites are getting more and more similar. Now you've Google Material Design is kind of widespread. Everybody's kind of using it or copying it. And is that, would that not, if everything looks more the same and kind of works the same, is that not better for websites or decreasing friction, or what is it? Yeah, is it good or bad? What's your thoughts, or what are your thoughts?
Okay. Well, hamburger first. I've always had a hard time with the arguments against the hamburger. I mean, the fact is, the hamburger gets used because you're on a small screen, so you have not got room for a lot of menu options, you know, and so the intent of the hamburger was, we'll put, if we have like 2 or 3 primary options, things that are the, you know, common use cases that people need to do frequently or everybody needs to do, and we need to surface the fact that these options exist and make those menu items, but then everything else goes under the hamburger, you know, and usually it means you have a bunch of other stuff, which most sites do. So I had a hard time disliking the hamburger. The argument seemed to be, well, we did a lot of testing and it found that people didn't look under the hamburger. Well, I always distrusted that testing, because my experience was, if people couldn't find what they were looking for, they'd try the hamburger, you know. So and by this point, and that was all like, you know, 6 years ago. By this point, I think everybody knows what the hamburger menu is, and we'll try it out. So you know, people have written a lot of good stuff. But again, I would say search for hamburger menu and Luke W, and you'll find the answer. It's like, he knows what he's talking about. And whether it would be better if everything looked kind of the same or followed a lot of the same design, you know, out of the same design principles. It's not bad, you know. I mean, it's sort of better to, it depends on what kind of thing you're doing, you know. Certainly there are a lot of sites that work really well that don't look like other sites, and that's fine. It's just a question of, they don't look like other sites, but are they clear? You know, when I go there, can I figure out how to use it? Can I find what I'm looking for? You know, that's sort of the criteria. Jacob Nielsen always said, you know, it's kind of good to, if there's a convention that everybody's using, it's not a bad idea to use it, because basically most people spend most of their time not on your site, but on other sites, you know. So if the sites that they use all the time and they know how to use them, it's kind of better if they come to your site and they right away know how to use your site. So, but there's a bit, I mean, you covered kind of a wide swath there. There's a difference between kind of sites that use the same kind of information architecture, that have the same kind of menu and the same kind of whatever. And then the whole broader questions of design, whether it's, you know, how much you should look like other sites. And they're two pretty big questions. But for the most part, you know, it gets kind of like, if you think you can do a really good job of it and you have evidence to show that what you're doing is a really good job of it, then you should feel freer to not do it the way everybody else does it. But you better prove it. You know, you better actually show it to people and, you know that they don't have any problems with it.
Yeah. Cool. I'm also checking the time, so I'm conscious already of the time, but I wanted to ask to make sort of like a picture, if the others have the book, if they have it there at hand, then they can show it. And then I can take a screenshot.
Yeah, I do mine on Kindle, which is
yeah.
Okay.
Somebody had me sign their Kindle once. That was kind of fun.
Do you have it, Evan, as well?
There you go.
I got it somewhere as an ebook. Just one sec.
Yeah, it's funny, like almost
here, I should
half hard book, half ebook.
I have one. There you go. Thanks, Timur.
Do you have it?
Get it without me. I don't remember if it's in the Kindle or the iBooks.
Okay, no worries. So then let me take the screenshot then. 1, 2.
File.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you very much for your time and all the answers. And hope you enjoyed. Hope you enjoyed listening as well to us at the beginning, discussing a bit.
Yeah, no, I really did. Like I said, I took a lot of notes. So thank you very much. Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. Hope everyone enjoyed as well.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Steve.
Hey everyone, I'm Carlos and welcome to a new book discussion of productbooklab.com. Every month we discuss online a book about product management together with the author and other product colleagues. If you want to find the recordings from our previous discussions and also join us and participate on the upcoming ones, go to productbooklab.com. To find out how to support the book club and help us keep it running without any ads, check the links in the description.